A lady kept showing up with bruises. Suspicious, her granddaughter decided to set up a security camera and was shocked by what she saw recorded. When Patricia entered her grandmother's house, she immediately felt a tense atmosphere. Mrs. Rosa was seated in her rocking chair, staring into the distance, lost in her own thoughts. With a heavy heart, Patricia approached slowly, her worry intensifying as she noticed the visible bruises on her grandmother's arm. Dark purple spots and red marks standing out painfully against her light brown skin. "Grandma, what happened?" Patricia's voice was soft but firm, full of concern. She knelt beside the chair, gently taking her grandmother's hand, feeling a mix of anger and sadness as she awaited an answer. Mrs. Rosa avoided her granddaughter's gaze, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing, dear. Don't worry. I must have hurt myself without realizing it," she responded in a tone that sounded almost rehearsed, and Patricia noticed the hesitation in her voice. She knew her grandmother well. The woman who had raised her after her mother's death was not one to injure herself so easily. "Are you hiding something?" Patricia insisted, trying to catch her grandmother's eyes. The silence that followed was heavy, almost palpable. Finally, Mrs. Rosa looked at her granddaughter, but there was sadness and fear in her eyes. "It's nothing, my dear. We get hurt sometimes. That's normal. Don't worry." Yet Patricia knew this was not normal. She could see the distress in her grandmother's eyes, despite her attempts to hide it. She couldn't hold back her frustration. "Grandma, please, trust me. I just want to help you. These bruises don't look accidental. Tell me the truth, please." Mrs. Rosa averted her eyes again, and Patricia felt her heart break at her grandmother's vulnerability. She knew Rosa was hiding something, but didn't want to push her too hard. At that moment, Mrs. Maria, Mrs. Rosa's caregiver, entered the room, interrupting the tense silence. "Good afternoon, Patricia. Everything all right here?" Patricia looked at Mrs. Maria, feeling a wave of distrust. She had always liked Mrs. Maria, but recent events made her feel paranoid. "Mrs. Maria, have you noticed these bruises on my grandmother? Do you know where they could be from?" "Yes, I noticed the bruises. I asked her several times, but she always gave me the same answer," said Mrs. Maria with a look of genuine concern. Still, Patricia couldn't shake her suspicion. Could Mrs. Maria be hiding something? "Thank you, Mrs. Maria. I just want to make sure my grandmother is okay," Patricia said, as the caregiver nodded understandingly. Yet she couldn't get rid of the feeling that something very serious was going on. "I can't ignore this," Patricia thought. "Something more is happening, and I need to find out what it is." That night, Patricia was determined to protect her grandmother. She picked up a small security camera she had bought some time ago, initially planning to use it for an investigative journalism project. With shaky hands, she discreetly installed the camera in Mrs. Rosa's bedroom, choosing an angle that covered the entire area. "Don't worry, Grandma. This is for your protection. I'm going to find out what's really happening here," she thought, as she positioned the camera strategically. Patricia felt a mix of fear and determination. She had to protect her grandmother, her only close family. "She's all I have left," she said aloud, trying to reassure herself she was doing the right thing. "I hope this reveals the truth, whatever it may be." After finishing with the camera, she returned to the living room, where she found Mrs. Rosa still sitting in her rocking chair, eyes closed. "Grandma, it's late. You should get some rest," she said softly. Mrs. Rosa slowly opened her eyes as if waking from a deep sleep, nodded gently, and got up, accepting Patricia's arm for support as they walked to her bedroom. Patricia felt a heavy weight on her shoulders. "I love you, Grandma. I promise I'll find out what's going on and protect you," she thought, watching her grandmother settle into bed before leaving the room, determined not to rest until the truth came to light. One day, Patricia was at her desk in the newsroom, surrounded by piles of documents and notes. The computer screen cast a glow on her face, highlighting her focused expression. "I chose this profession because I believe in the truth," she reflected, reviewing an article on political corruption. The drive to uncover the truth had always propelled Patricia. Each new piece of information in her investigations felt like a puzzle piece she was meant to fit together. She recalled precious moments from her childhood with her grandmother Rosa, who had been everything to her after her mother's death. Looking at an old photo of them, she thought, "Grandma always supported me, even during the hardest times." The image of Rosa, with her warm smile and comforting hugs, was a constant reminder of why Patricia never gave up, no matter how challenging things got. Memories of her childhood flooded her mind. She saw herself as a child, holding Rosa's hand in the park. "Grandma taught me to be strong and independent," she thought, feeling a surge of gratitude. She remembered the late nights when Rosa stayed up with her, helping with homework and encouraging her love for knowledge and justice. The phone on her desk rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was a source with new information about an ongoing investigation. "Hello, this is Patricia," she answered firmly and professionally, listening closely to the caller and jotting down notes, absorbing every detail. The truth must be revealed no matter the cost, she thought, feeling her determination grow. Patricia had always felt a deep bond with her grandmother. "Every success I have is a tribute to her sacrifice," she thought, as she reviewed her notes, aware that the strength and resilience she showed in her career came directly from Rosa's example. She wouldn't be here without her, she reflected, smiling gratefully as she remembered another rainy night filled with warmth and teaching. She was afraid of the thunder and got out of bed. He held her gently and whispered, "Don't be afraid, sweetheart. I'm here with you." That memory brought tears to Patricia's eyes. Grandma was always my rock, my safe place, she thought, feeling her urgency to protect Rosa grow even stronger. The newsroom was frenetic, but Patricia stood out for her calm and focus. Many of her colleagues felt inspired by her determination. "She's relentless when it comes to uncovering the truth," she heard a co-worker say, which made her smile, knowing her work was a reflection of the values Rosa had instilled in her. Patricia glanced at the clock. "It's time to head home," she thought, feeling a bit tired. But before leaving, she reviewed her notes on the investigation into her grandmother's bruises one last time. "I'm going to find out who's hurting Grandma," she promised herself, closing her notebook with a sigh of determination. As she left the office, Patricia reflected on the importance of her work. "Every story I uncover is a victory for the truth," she thought. She knew that her desire to make a difference was something she owed to Rosa. "Everything I do is for her and for everyone in need of justice," she concluded as she walked home. Meanwhile, Rosa sat in the living room, the scent of chamomile tea filling the air. She looked around, feeling a mix of pride and sadness. "This house is full of memories," she thought, gently rubbing her still sore arm. Every corner, every object told the story of her life and family. "I have such deep love for this home and everything I've built here." Rosa had always been a strong woman and recalled the difficult times after her daughter Laura's death. "Losing Laura was the hardest thing I've ever faced," she thought, feeling tears welling up. "But I had Patricia. She gave me the strength to keep going." Raising her granddaughter alone had been a challenge, but Rosa never gave up. She remembered little Patricia running around the garden, and watching her grow and overcome obstacles had made everything more bearable. Rosa knew her love and sacrifice had helped shape the strong woman her granddaughter had become. Recently, however, Rosa had been feeling more vulnerable. "I'm getting older," she thought with a sigh, looking at the bruises on her arm. They were a constant reminder of her recent frailty. "I can't let Patricia find out what's happening," she thought, trying to hide her worry. She didn't want to burden her granddaughter with more problems. It was getting late, and Rosa knew it was time to go to bed. "I need to rest," she told herself, standing up with effort. Every movement reminded her of her age and the challenges she was facing, but she didn't plan on giving up. "Patricia needs me as much as I need her," she thought, as she entered her bedroom, unaware that a camera was hidden there. "She's so worried about me," she reflected with a sad smile, not realizing that Patricia had set up the camera to uncover the truth. "I understand," but I need to protect her from this reality. Rosa knew the situation was becoming unsustainable, but she didn't want to cause her granddaughter any more pain. Lying in bed, she reflected on her life. I've done the best I could, she thought, feeling a mix of pride and regret. She closed her eyes, letting herself drift into memories of a life filled with love and sacrifice. I love her so much, she thought, as sleep gently took over. Later, Patricia entered the room to check on her. "Grandma, how are you feeling?" she asked softly. Rosa opened her eyes and, hiding her worry, smiled. "I'm fine, dear. Just a bit tired." Patricia took her grandmother's hand and felt its fragility. "I'm going to find out what's happening," she thought. Seeing that Rosa had drifted off again, Patricia quietly left the room. "I have to figure this out," she thought, feeling her heart ache. Each passing day made her feel an even greater urgency to protect her. "I'll uncover the truth, no matter what it takes," she vowed, heading to her own room, ready to continue her search the next day. For several days, Patricia reviewed the camera footage, but found nothing that explained what was happening. Her mind wandered to Rosa's life and all the challenges she had faced. That evening, a warm light filled the living room, creating a comforting atmosphere as Patricia's thoughts traveled to the past, remembering her grandmother's early years. "I was widowed so young," Rosa thought, feeling a lump in her throat as she recalled her husband, who had tragically passed away. "I had to be strong to raise Laura alone. Every day was a struggle," she remembered, but she always found strength in the love she had for her children. They had been her reason to keep going. She remembered Laura and Leopoldo as children, running joyfully through the garden. "Those were the best years of my life," she reflected, a nostalgic smile crossing her face. Despite all the hardships, they had managed to find happiness. Life hadn't been easy, but those happy moments made every sacrifice worthwhile. Rosa worked tirelessly, often taking double shifts to ensure her children had everything they needed. The years flew by, and Laura and Leopoldo grew up. Laura was always the sensitive one, she thought fondly, remembering her daughter. She had such a big heart. Laura had a brief relationship that led to her pregnancy with Patricia. When Laura told Rosa she was expecting a baby, Rosa felt a mix of concern and joy. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to support her in every way. However, life had other plans. Health complications caused Laura to pass away when Patricia was only 4 years old. Losing Laura was the deepest pain I've ever felt, Rosa thought as tears slipped down her face. But she had to be strong for Patricia. Raising her granddaughter alone was an enormous challenge, but Rosa never wavered. Patricia needed her, and that need gave her the strength to keep going. "I promised I'd do everything I could to protect and love my granddaughter." Leopoldo, on the other hand, grew distant from the family after marrying young and having 2 children. "I always thought Leopoldo needed space," Rosa reflected, "but I never imagined that distance would become such a wide gap." This separation was a silent ache in her heart, yet Patricia brought a new joy into her life. "She gave me the strength to carry on," Rosa thought with a smile. She remembered Patricia's first steps and the afternoons they spent together in the kitchen. Every laugh and every hug reminded her that life still had so much to offer. Challenges continued to arise, but Rosa faced them with courage and determination. "I had to be both mother and father for Patricia," she thought, feeling the weight of the responsibilities she had carried over the years. "And I regret nothing." The love she felt for her granddaughter was unconditional, motivating her to keep going despite all obstacles. Rosa recalled tough times, like those days when money was tight, and she had to find ways to cover the bills. "I worked hard, but I always did it with love," she thought, because Patricia deserved the very best. Each sacrifice was a testament to the unbreakable love Rosa felt for her granddaughter, and she knew every effort had been worth it. Despite the hardships, Rosa found joy in the little things, a true gift of life. "She's become a strong, independent woman," Rosa reflected with pride. Rosa felt immensely proud of her granddaughter, who had chosen a career in investigative journalism, always seeking truth and defending those in need. It's an honor to see her like this, Rosa thought, with a spark of satisfaction in her eyes. Returning to the present, Rosa looked at the photo of Laura and Patricia on her nightstand. I did the best I could, and I'm sure Laura would feel as proud of Patricia as I do. Though years had passed, and the challenges had been many, Rosa's love and strength continued to guide her granddaughter. Life was hard, but love always kept us together, she thought serenely, finishing with a smile. Meanwhile, Patricia sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She thought about the security camera she had installed in Rosa's bedroom. I hope this helps explain those bruises, she murmured to herself as she reviewed the footage. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Rosa was only seen sleeping or moving around the house as usual. Patricia sighed in frustration. I can't give up now, she told herself, determined to continue. With each passing day, her tension grew. Watching her grandmother more closely, she began to notice subtle details that had previously gone unnoticed. Her grandmother seemed more tired than usual. Watching Rosa prepare something in the kitchen, Patricia reflected, something strange is going on. This uncertainty unsettled her, and she knew she had to uncover the truth soon. She started paying even more attention to Rosa's daily routines. Every gesture, every sigh of exhaustion or pain became a potential clue. Am I being paranoid? She wondered, but quickly dismissed the doubt. No, something's happening here, she thought, and her determination grew each day, fueled by her deep love for her grandmother. The lack of concrete evidence began to weigh on her. What if I never find out what's happening? She questioned, struggling against the frustration. She knew she had to be patient, but the absence of answers only increased her anxiety. I can't leave my grandmother in this situation, she promised herself, trying to stay calm. Little by little, Patricia began avoiding unnecessary commitments, preferring to stay home to keep a close watch on Rosa. I need to be here in case something happens, she thought, cancelling an outing with friends. Her social life began to take a back seat to her obsession with discovering the truth. My friends will understand, she rationalized. My grandmother is my priority right now. Some days, Rosa received visits from neighbors and friends, and Patricia began to wonder if someone outside the family might be involved. Maybe one of them has noticed something without realizing it, she reflected. What if it's Maria who's hurting my grandmother? She wondered, recalling how kind the caregiver had always been. Still, Patricia knew she couldn't rule anyone out. I have to consider every possibility, she decided, even if it meant suspecting those close to them. The thought made her uncomfortable, but finding the truth was her top priority. Still, she knew she couldn't let her guard down. Days later, Patricia reviewed the recordings again. Determined, she told herself, I have to find proof, despite the exhaustion and sorrow in her eyes. Suddenly, something on the screen caught her attention. Her uncle Leopoldo had entered Rosa's room. Patricia's heart raced. What's he doing here? She murmured, a mix of shock and fear in her voice. She watched as Leopoldo approached Rosa with a threatening demeanor. I can't believe what I'm seeing, she thought, as tears began to slide down her face. Leopoldo grabbed Rosa by the arms and shook her roughly. How could you, Uncle Leopoldo? Patricia whispered, feeling betrayal and pain flooding her. In the footage, her uncle was forcing Rosa to sign a document, but she resisted. What does he want her to sign? Patricia thought, her anguish deepening as she saw her grandmother overwhelmed with fear. I won't sign that, she heard her grandmother say in a weak yet determined voice. Leopoldo, visibly agitated, raised his voice, insisting with the paper in his hand. Rosa stood her ground, and Patricia watched as her uncle's frustration escalated, making the situation even more tense. This is monstrous, she thought, feeling a mix of helplessness and horror at the scene. She knew she had to act quickly. I need to gather all the evidence, she thought, saving the recordings onto a flash drive. The police need to see this. The urgency of the situation pushed her to act swiftly. I won't let Leopoldo get away with this, she thought, as she prepared to leave the house. Before heading out, she went to her grandmother's room. There she looked at Rosa, who was sleeping, unaware of the danger. "I'll protect you, Grandma," she whispered, feeling a mix of love and sadness. "You did so much for me. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Patricia thought about her uncle Leopoldo. She hadn't seen him in years, and it was hard to accept his presence in Rosa's house. "I never imagined he'd be capable of something like this." The image of the footage filled her with rage. How could he? Patricia also began to question Maria, the caregiver. How could Maria not have noticed what was happening? Doubt gnawed at her. Uncle Leopoldo won't get away with this, she thought, as anger surged within her. Resolute, she got into her car and headed to Leopoldo's house. "He'll pay for what he did," she promised, her heart burning with determination. Patricia parked in front of Leopoldo's house, her heart pounding. Rage pulsed through her veins, but she felt an unshakable resolve. She knocked hard on the door, waiting anxiously for her uncle to appear. Leopoldo opened the door, surprise on his face quickly turning to disdain. "Patricia, what are you doing here?" he asked, attempting to stay composed. Patricia walked in without waiting for an invitation, her gaze fixed on Leopoldo. "I know what you did to Grandma," she said firmly, emotion in her voice. "You won't get what you want." Leopoldo tried to defend himself, raising his hands in a show of innocence. "I haven't done anything. You don't know what you're talking about," he replied, struggling to stay calm. But Patricia wasn't intimidated. "There's no point in denying it. I have the recordings," she stated, feeling her anger build. "I installed a camera in Grandma's room, and I saw everything. I saw you mistreat her and force her to sign that document." Leopoldo's expression shifted from surprise to anger. "You have no right to do that," he shouted, stepping toward Patricia, but she stood her ground. "I have every right to protect my grandmother," she replied, her voice firm and resolute. "And I will, no matter the cost. You're going to pay for what you did, Uncle Leopoldo. I won't let you hurt her again." Leopoldo tried a different approach, taking on a more conciliatory tone. "Patricia, you're overreacting. I was just trying to set things in order," he said, attempting to sound reasonable. "Mom is old and sometimes confused. I only wanted to make sure everything was in place." Patricia felt a surge of disgust at his words. "Set things in order," she repeated incredulously. "You forced her to sign a document while you mistreated her. What you've done is unforgivable, and you're going to pay for it." Leopoldo realized his attempts to justify himself were failing and took on a defensive stance. "I have evidence," Patricia stated, locking her eyes onto his. "This isn't going to end here," he threatened, but Patricia shook her head. "You'll face justice." With those words she left, resolutely heading to the police station, feeling a mix of relief and adrenaline. When she arrived, Patricia entered with the flash drive in her hand, determined. She approached the front desk, her nerves on edge, but her resolve unwavering. "I need to speak to someone about an abuse case," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling she felt. The officer, named Luis, listened carefully as Patricia explained her grandmother's situation. "I have evidence that my uncle is hurting her," she stated, showing the flash drive. Officer Luis reviewed the recordings. "This is really serious," he said finally. "We're going to start a formal investigation." Patricia felt a wave of immediate relief, though she knew this was just the beginning. "Thank you," she replied, filled with both gratitude and worry for Rosa. "I just want my grandmother to be safe." She returned home with a heavy heart, knowing a difficult conversation awaited her. As she entered, she found Rosa sitting in the living room, visibly shaken. "Grandma, we need to talk. I know what Uncle Leopoldo did, and I've taken steps to stop him." Rosa began to cry. Silent tears slipped down her wrinkled cheeks. "He wanted me to sign a document to give him the house," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to, but he threatened me." Patricia felt her heart tighten upon hearing the confession. "I'm so scared," Rosa added, trembling and unsure of what to do. Patricia hugged her tightly, sharing her pain and fear as if they were her own. "You're not alone, Grandma. You're safe with me," she said firmly. Rosa clung to her granddaughter, finding comfort in that embrace. "Thank you, dear," she whispered weakly, but with gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you." After talking with Rosa, Patricia decided to confront Rosa's caregiver, Maria. "How is it possible you didn't notice what was happening with my grandmother?" she asked, distrust evident in her voice. Maria, visibly uncomfortable, replied that she truly hadn't known anything. "I was just doing my job," she insisted. Patricia looked at her closely, searching for signs of dishonesty. "It's hard to believe you didn't notice anything," Patricia responded, feeling a wave of frustration. As the investigation continued, the truth came to light. Maria was complicit with Leopoldo. She had known everything. Officer Luis revealed to Patricia that Leopoldo had paid Maria to keep quiet about his visits and threats. Patricia felt a mix of anger and betrayal. How could she do this? She thought, her heart aching. We trusted her. Patricia promptly fired Maria with resolve. "I can't allow someone who's betrayed our trust to continue caring for my grandmother," she said, unwavering. Maria left in silence, her face marked by shame. Patricia felt a sense of relief, though also sadness. Now she needed to find someone they could truly trust. Ultimately, she hired a new caregiver recommended by trustworthy friends. "She'll take good care of you, Grandma," she assured Rosa, trying to provide comfort. "I've checked all her references. We're in good hands." Rosa managed a faint smile, still affected by recent events, but trusting Patricia's judgment. The police investigation progressed quickly. Leopoldo was called in for questioning, and the evidence from the recordings weighed heavily against him. Patricia closely followed each step of the process, determined to see justice served. "He's not going to get away with this," she thought, watching as the police gathered more evidence. "Finally, Grandma will have peace." However, ever since she reported Leopoldo, strange things began happening around her. An unsettling feeling of being followed accompanied her everywhere. "I must be imagining it," she thought at first, trying to shake off the paranoia, but the signs were undeniable. "Maybe someone is trying to intimidate me," she thought, her heart sinking. The signals, initially subtle, soon became direct and terrifying. "Withdraw the complaint against Leopoldo, or you'll regret it," one of the messages read, causing Patricia to tremble with fear. Her worry for Rosa's safety grew day by day. "I have to protect her," she resolved, determined to keep her grandmother safe at all costs. One night, while reviewing documents on her laptop, Patricia noticed a car parked across the street with its lights off. A wave of panic washed over her, prompting her to enhance their home security by installing cameras and upgrading the locks. "I won't let them intimidate us," she thought, her expression resolute. Later, she sat next to Rosa in the living room, trying to manage the situation without alarming her. "Grandma, we need to be cautious," she said, holding her hand firmly. Rosa, with worry in her eyes, asked, "What's going on, dear?" Sensing the fear starting to creep in, Patricia sighed, searching for the right words. "Someone is trying to intimidate us, but everything will be okay. I've already taken steps for our safety." Rosa nodded, trusting her granddaughter, although she couldn't hide her fear. "Why are they doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Looking her grandmother in the eyes, Patricia replied, "They want us to withdraw the complaint against Uncle Leopoldo. But we won't give in. We're going to fight for justice." The following days were filled with tension. Patricia remained on constant alert, watching every movement around her. "I won't let them hurt us," she repeatedly thought as she took additional precautions for their safety, avoiding going out alone and keeping in constant contact with trusted friends. One night, she received a chilling message: "Withdraw the complaint, or something worse will happen," accompanied by a close-up photo of her house. "This is too much," she thought, feeling a mix of anger and fear. She knew she needed to strengthen their security measures and go back to the police. Determined, she decided to visit the station with the new evidence of the threats. Upon arrival, she handed the evidence to Officer Luis, who was in charge of the case. "They're trying to intimidate us into withdrawing the complaint against my uncle," she explained firmly, despite her nervousness. Luis examined the evidence, his expression becoming increasingly serious. "We're going to increase surveillance at your home," he assured her, taking notes. "Don't worry, Patricia. We'll ensure that you and your grandmother are safe." Patricia felt a momentary sense of relief, though she knew there was still much to do. "Thank you," she said, as she left the station with renewed determination. Later, she gathered with close friends and family, explaining the situation and asking for their help. "We need eyes and ears everywhere," she said as her friends listened intently. "Any suspicious activity, any strange movements, we need to know about it." With a support network around her, Patricia felt empowered. They intensified security measures at home. In addition to cameras and reinforced locks, she installed alarms and motion sensors. "Every precaution is necessary," she thought while reviewing the security systems. "We can't take any chances." Her determination to protect Rosa and herself was unwavering, despite the constant fear. One day, while dealing with the stress of the threats, she received a call from Officer Luis. "Patricia, I need you to come to the station as soon as possible. We have updates on the case." Her heart raced. "I'm on my way," she replied, feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. She gathered her things and quickly left, her mind racing with potential revelations. Upon arrival, Luis greeted her with a serious expression. "Patricia, we've made an important discovery," he began, leading her to a conference room. "We've identified who's behind the threats against you and Mrs. Rosa." Patricia felt a knot of nervousness in her stomach. "Who is it?" she asked, eager for answers. Luis took a deep breath before revealing, "It's Leopoldo's children. They're heavily in debt, and along with him, they devised a plan to take your grandmother's house and sell it to pay off their father's debts." A wave of shock and anger washed over her. "I can't believe it," she murmured, trying to process the information. "So, this whole harassment was orchestrated by them?" "That's right," Luis confirmed. "We have enough evidence to show that Leopoldo and his children were behind the threats, trying to force her to withdraw the complaint and sign over the house." Patricia felt a mix of relief and indignation. "They will pay for this," she said firmly. "I won't let them get away with it." Luis nodded with determination. "We're going to arrest Leopoldo and his children immediately," he said. "You did the right thing by coming to us, Patricia. Now we can ensure that you and your grandmother are safe." Patricia nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and relief. "Thank you, Luis," she said, her voice emotional. "Finally, this will come to an end." As Luis organized the operation, Patricia reflected on all the pain and suffering they had endured, all due to greed. A lump formed in her throat, but the hope for justice filled her with optimism. "We will succeed, Grandma," she thought, smiling determinedly. Minutes later, Luis returned to the room. "We're ready to act," he announced. "You can go home now, Patricia. We'll take care of everything." She felt a weight lift off her shoulders. "I'm going to tell Grandma," she said as she stood up. "She needs to know that everything will be okay." Luis nodded. "Good luck, Patricia, and don't hesitate to call us if you need more help." Patricia returned home feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in weeks. Upon entering, she found Rosa in the living room, visibly worried. "Grandma, I have good news," she said, sitting down beside her. "The police found out who was behind the threats. It was Uncle Leopoldo's children." Rosa was left in shock. "But why are they in debt?" she asked, incredulous. "They want to sell their house to pay off their debts," Patricia explained. "But the police are already taking action and are going to arrest them all." Rosa began to cry, but this time it was tears of relief. "Thank God," she said, finally taking Patricia's hand. The police operation was carried out quickly and efficiently. Leopoldo and his children were arrested and taken to the station. Patricia followed the news on television, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. "They're finally going to pay for what they did," she thought, relief washing over her as she felt justice had been served. In his cell, Leopoldo reflected on his choices. "How did I get to this point?" he wondered, sitting in the cold prison. He knew that his greed had led him to ruin, but regret had come too late. Patricia visited him once, just to look into the eyes of the man who had caused so much suffering. "You've destroyed our family," she said firmly. Leopoldo couldn't meet her gaze. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, but Patricia knew those words couldn't erase what he had done. Leopoldo's children faced their own battles in prison. Our father told us, each one thought in their cell, realizing that their actions were unforgivable, yet feeling a deep bitterness for having blindly followed Leopoldo's plans. We should never have gotten involved in this, reflected the oldest son, feeling the weight of his decisions. Life in prison was tough, and they faced the consequences of their actions every day. While Patricia felt relief from the justice served, she also experienced the pain of family betrayal. They were part of our family, she thought as she looked through old photos. But she knew she couldn't let that sadness consume her. Rosa needed her, and now more than ever, she had to be strong. I'll keep moving forward for us, she decided with renewed determination. The presence of Pedro and Lucas in her life was a constant reminder that there was hope and love. Despite the challenging circumstances, the following days saw Patricia and Rosa gradually returning to normalcy. The threats had ceased, and a sense of safety filled their home once more. "We did it, Grandma," Patricia said, hugging Rosa tightly. "They can't hurt us anymore." Rosa smiled, still emotional. "Thank you, dear," she said, "for never giving up on me." Patricia knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but with Rosa by her side, she felt ready to face anything. "We will keep moving forward," she thought, feeling hope rekindle within her. The love and resilience that bound them were stronger than any adversity, and that was all they needed to keep pushing ahead, knowing that the worst was behind them. Months passed, and life returned to normal. It was then that something new happened in the lives of the grandmother and granddaughter. Patricia felt a new spark of life when she met Pedro, a dedicated young doctor who unexpectedly crossed her path. "He's different," she thought, as she prepared to introduce him to her grandmother. Rosa was in the kitchen making tea when Patricia walked in with Pedro. "Grandma, this is Pedro," she said with a nervous smile. Rosa looked at him with curiosity, and after a moment of silence, she broke into a warm smile. "Welcome, Pedro," she said, extending her hand. Pedro took Rosa's hand with respect and joy. "Mrs. Rosa, I've heard so much about you," he said, immediately feeling at ease. Rosa laughed, her eyes sparkling with affection. "I hope it's all good things," he replied, sharing a conspiratorial smile with Patricia. "Please sit down and have some tea with us," Rosa invited, sensing a good energy in the air. As they chatted, Patricia watched the interaction between Pedro and Rosa, feeling relieved and happy. Pedro shared funny stories about his work, making Rosa laugh. "You have a great sense of humor," she said, enjoying his company more and more. Patricia felt a wave of relief. "This is a great start," she thought, looking at her grandmother with happiness. As the months went by, the relationship between Patricia and Pedro grew stronger. "He's everything I needed," Patricia reflected, falling more in love with him each day. Pedro was always attentive and caring, both towards her and Rosa. "Patricia, you've found a good man," Rosa, ever observant, said. "I'm so happy for you, dear." Patricia smiled, feeling her grandmother's support as a blessing. Pedro and Patricia decided to take a step forward in their relationship. "Will you marry me?" Pedro asked, taking Patricia's hand in a tender gesture. Patricia felt her heart race. "Yes, Pedro, I will," she replied, excitement bubbling within her. The wedding was lovingly planned, with Rosa involved in every detail. "I want you to feel part of this, Grandma," Patricia said, as they chose the flowers. "Of course, dear," Rosa responded, her eyes filled with pride. The wedding day arrived, and the ceremony was simple yet overflowing with love. Rosa sat in the front row, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she thought, as she watched her granddaughter walk down the aisle. Pedro looked at Patricia with love and admiration. "I'm ready to start this new life with you," he thought, feeling the excitement of the moment. During the reception, Rosa gave a brief speech that moved everyone. "Pedro, welcome to our family. Patricia, I'm so happy for you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You will always have my love and support." She embraced her grandmother tightly. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, feeling grateful to have her in her life. For Patricia, everything felt dynamic. "I've never felt so complete," she thought as she arranged her new home with Pedro. They always kept Rosa close, visiting her regularly and ensuring she never felt alone. "You're part of our lives, Grandma," Patricia said while helping Rosa tend to the garden. Rosa felt fulfilled, seeing her granddaughter's happiness. Pedro proved to be a devoted and loving husband, excited about the future. "We'll make sure you have everything you need," he agreed, and the constant presence of Pedro and Patricia brought joy and security to Rosa. 2 years passed since Patricia and Pedro got married, and life was generous to them. Joy filled their home when Patricia shared the news. "Pedro, we're going to have a baby," she said, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. Pedro hugged her tightly, feeling like the luckiest man in the world. "Patricia," he responded, his voice trembling with emotion, "our child will be so loved." Throughout the pregnancy, Rosa was there for every moment. "What do you think of this name?" Patricia asked, as they discussed possible names for the baby. "Lucas is a beautiful name, dear," she said, gently stroking Patricia's belly. "He will bring so much light into our lives." Patricia nodded, feeling the warmth of family love. The day Lucas was born, the family gathered at the hospital, waiting anxiously. "Everything is going to be fine," Patricia thought, feeling secure with Pedro by her side. When Lucas finally arrived, the sound of the baby's cry filled the room, bringing tears to everyone's eyes. "He's perfect," Pedro said, gazing at his son with admiration. "Our little miracle." Rosa, holding Lucas for the first time, felt a wave of happiness she had never experienced before. "My great-grandson," she murmured, tears rolling down her face. "You are the joy of our family, Lucas." Patricia watched the scene with a smile, feeling complete. "Grandma, you're so lucky to have him," she said, filled with emotion. Rosa simply nodded, unable to contain her joy. The first few months of Lucas's life were filled with discoveries and invaluable moments. "Are you ready?" Pedro asked, marveling at each new milestone their son achieved. Patricia felt fulfilled caring for him. "Lucas, with all the love I learned from Rosa, I want to be the best mother I can be," she thought, watching her little one sleep, just as Rosa had been for her. Grandma Rosa spent hours rocking Lucas in her arms, singing him soft lullabies and telling him stories. "You're going to grow up surrounded by love, little one," she promised, feeling rejuvenated by the presence of her great-grandson. "I'll be here to witness every step you take." Lucas, with his bright eyes, seemed to understand every word, bringing renewed joy and hope into Rosa's life. Patricia and Pedro were delighted by every new milestone Lucas reached. "He's our greatest joy," Patricia said, as Pedro cradled him in his arms. The house was always filled with laughter and love, reflecting the happiness Lucas brought into their lives. "We're building something beautiful here," Pedro thought, feeling grateful for his family. "I feel blessed to be so involved," Rosa expressed, cherishing every moment with Lucas. Patricia also felt grateful for her grandmother's constant presence. "You are our pillar, Grandma," she said, always recognizing Rosa's support and love. Lucas's first birthday was a celebration filled with joy and laughter. "He's growing up so fast," Pedro observed, while Rosa helped decorate the cake. Patricia felt a wave of emotion as she watched the family gathered together, sharing in the happiness of the occasion. "This is just the beginning of many celebrations," she thought, looking at Lucas with affection. At the end of the party, Rosa held Lucas in her arms, feeling happier than ever. "You've brought a new light into our lives, my great-grandson," she whispered as Lucas played with her fingers. "Thank you for this joy." Patricia watched the scene with tears in her eyes, feeling profoundly blessed. "Our family is complete," she thought, her heart full of gratitude and love. Meanwhile, Leopoldo and his sons realized they could never erase their past. "We have to live with the consequences of our actions," Leopoldo reflected. Overwhelmed by guilt, he decided to leave his job, but they continued to look for ways to help other inmates, trying to make a difference. "At least we can try to leave something good behind," they said in their meetings. It was a long and difficult road, but necessary for them to find some kind of peace. After serving their sentences, they decided that the only way to move forward was to ask for forgiveness from Rosa and Patricia. "We need to do this," Leopoldo said, feeling the weight of his guilt. "We owe the girls an apology." The sons nodded, knowing this was the only way to seek some inner peace. Patricia was at home with Rosa when the doorbell rang. Opening the door, she was surprised to see Leopoldo and his sons. "What are you doing here?" she asked, feeling tense. Leopoldo, with a look of deep remorse, replied, "We've come to ask for forgiveness." Patricia felt a rush of mixed emotions, but decided to listen to what they had to say. Rosa was sitting in the living room when they entered. "Mom," Leopoldo began with a trembling voice, "we've come to apologize for all the harm we've caused." Rosa looked at them with a heavy heart, burdened by years of pain and betrayal. The sons, seeing the suffering in Rosa's eyes, felt even more remorseful. "We just wanted to follow our father, but we've realized how wrong we were," the eldest said, tears in her eyes as she addressed her grandmother. "What do you want to do, Grandma?" Patricia asked, wanting to respect Rosa's feelings. Rosa took a deep breath. The silence in the room was palpable. Finally, she spoke with a trembling voice. "I carry resentment in my heart, but I can't forget what you did." Patricia looked at her grandmother with admiration. "I feel the same way," she added. "I forgive you," she said firmly, "but we can't go back to what we were before. Please continue with your lives." Leopoldo and his sons nodded, understanding Rosa and Patricia's decision. "Forgive us," Leopoldo said, his voice full of gratitude. "We don't want to cause any more pain. We will respect your wishes and move on with our lives." Patricia felt a mix of relief and closure. "I wish you all the best," she said sincerely, "but this is the end of our contact." As they left, Leopoldo glanced back one last time, feeling a blend of sadness and relief. "They've forgiven us," he thought with a sigh. "Now we have to rebuild our lives away from them." The sons nodded, ready to begin a new chapter. "We will honor that," the youngest promised, determined to do better. Rosa and Patricia remained silent for a moment after they left. "Was that the right thing to do?" the grandmother asked Patricia, seeking confirmation, her eyes still glistening with tears. "We did what our hearts told us to do." Pedro entered the room, carrying Lucas in his arms. "Is everything okay?" he asked, sensing the tension in the air. Looking at Lucas, who was smiling innocently, Patricia felt hope for the future. "Our family is safe and united. That's what matters." The days that followed were filled with reflection and renewal. Patricia felt lighter knowing she had forgiven, but she also established healthy boundaries. "Forgiveness is liberating," she thought while playing with Lucas in the garden. "But it's important to protect what we've built." Leopoldo and his sons continued with their lives, carrying the weight of their mistakes, but also the opportunity for redemption. "We have a second chance," Leopoldo told his sons, feeling grateful for the forgiveness they received. "Let's make the most of it." They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they were determined to honor Rosa and Patricia's forgiveness. Watching Lucas play, Rosa felt at peace. "We've been through so much," she reflected, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. "But we're here, together and strong." Patricia sat next to her grandmother, holding her hand. "Let's move forward, Grandma, together," she always said with a smile. Thus, with love and resilience, they continued to build their lives, knowing they had made peace with the past and were ready for a bright future. Did you enjoy today's story? Then subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. See you in the next video.